in cities such as Paris, London, Lisbon, and New York, alongside an e-commerce serving Europe and the United States. Combining tradition and innovation, all products are made in its own factory in Rio de Janeiro, which earned Zero Waste certification this year. This social environmental commitment is a daily priority for the company, which has a tradition of supporting social projects and NGOs. Granado continues to grow in both national and international markets, celebrating its tropical identity in perfumery and honoring its historical heritage.
Please welcome on stage Sissi Freeman, moderated by Samantha Tams.
We're so far away.
I know.
No?
It does.
Feels empty. Anyway, hi guys, how are you? Please take your seats. We would like to start this session. First, I want to ask you guys, who has had the opportunity to go to the pop-up store and check out Granado's activation? Show of hands. Okay, you guys need to go right now. I don't see enough hands. It is a very beautiful installation of just the brand's DNA, and I'm really happy to have Sissi Freeman here, all over from Brazil, in this conversation. For me, Granado it's a really great case study for all of you guys. I hope that you get all the information that I want in this conversation and a takeaway for you guys. It's basically, a very strong brand DNA, which is the first thing that we always mention to brands when they are developing their storyline, their identity. First and foremost, Granado is a great example for that. Granado is also a really great example of investing in your own stores, and Sissi's going to tell us why. I also want you guys to understand more how Brazil operates. I don't know if you guys know, but my mission here in LAFS has always been to integrating the community, and we've been speaking about this since the morning. Latin America is such a diverse region, but Brazil is always kind of like, and it's not like it's left out, because it's not, but it's such a big market, and it's so different. There's a language barrier, that they kind of operate in a different way. And I really want you guys and myself to understand how Brazilians do business, and if there's opportunity for you guys to go to Brazil and sell, or even how, when they think of internationalizing their brand, why do they do so? So I hope that these three takeaways are good for you guys. So I really want to introduce you guys to Sissi Freeman. She is the Marketing and Sales Director at Granado since 2005. Sissi has been pivotal in revitalizing the brands and boosting its international stature. In our conversation, we'll uncover the fascinating journey of Granado, a company rooted in the heart of Rio de Janeiro since 1870. This brand is like really, really old. And we want to talk about how Granado has utilized its rich Brazilian heritage, a vibrant Carioca style to carve out a unique place in the global market. And we'll also delve into how Sissi has led the brand through a strategic mix of traditional values and innovative practices, enabling it to flourish in both prestigious international and domestic markets. So, welcome, Sissi.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Well, I think that was a great introduction. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all. You asked how many people knew Granada, but maybe how many of you are Brazilian? That's one of my curiosities. Well, yes, there are a few, and I imagine Brazilians know Granado very well. We've been around, as you mentioned, for 154 years, and so it's a very generational brand, loved and cherished by generations of Brazilians. And I think one of the things that we were going to say is how Every Brazilian has at least a Granado soap or something in their bathroom or something that really their grandfather used to use. And I think that for us is so special. And I think that's one of the things that makes the brand special. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so hard going abroad, because we have to start introducing ourselves. And so that's really been one of the turning points. But in anyways, it's a pleasure to be here. And I think to be at LAFS this year is when we've been abroad for a while, but this is the year that we started investing in the US with the store in New York, and now with our pop-up here in Miami on Tuesday at Aventura. But for us really to partner with LAFS, we know how important and how special it is, and so we're really proud to be here. And so thank you so much for you and
We are so happy to have you also here. And so I really want to start really, like, obviously we mentioned, this brand is from 1870, was established as an apothecary brand way in its beginnings by Jose Antonio Cochito Granado, right?
Perfect.
In Rio de Janeiro. And it was a series of successful events that combined with the brand's ability to perform in the circumstances to thrive into the future. Why don't you tell us a little bit of the story of Granado?
So Granado was founded 154 years ago as a pharmacy. Mr. Granado, he left Portugal and he landed in Rio and at the port, and he started working in this pharmacy, which eventually he bought in January of 1870 and changing the name to Granado. And throughout the years, it became the biggest pharmacy in Brazil. He actually brought his brother, who used to do the formulations, was a pharmacist. And throughout the years, Granado became very well known, especially with the Brazilian royal family that lived in Rio. They had fled Europe, and so it became this, pharmacies at the time were really where people would go to meet each other, a lot of politicians, very affluent people. And so some of the products really, especially like a foot powder, some of the bar soap, some fragrances, really became very well known among the local population and eventually with Brazilians. And so my father, who is English, was living in Brazil in 1990s, and he was a banker. And he was actually hired by the grandson of Mr. Granado to sell the company. And being British, he really saw how special the story and history of the company was, because Brazil is a very new economy, and not many, because with the arrival of many multinationals in Brazil, many of the very historical brands really eventually ended up dying and not being around anymore, and the quality had gone down. But he really saw everyone he mentioned about Granado had a story, like I mentioned before, of, my grandmother, I remember when she would take me to the pharmacy. And so eventually he asked the owner if he would sell the company to him, and Mr. Granado said yes. And so in 1994, 30 years ago, he bought the company, and that's when he really started investing in quality of the products, in really restoring the tradition. And 10 years later, I was living in New York, and he asked if I would start helping with him in some projects, which was opening the first store, helping him with packaging. It was always something I loved. And so I started working with him temporarily 20 years ago, and I'm still here. So. And
what's your background? What did you study?
I actually studied political economy, nothing to do with, but it gave me a good financial background. My dad is a banker, so obviously that counts a lot to work with him. But I've always loved arts, being creative, so I've been always very interested in that. But most importantly, I've always loved cosmetics, fragrances, and so it's easy when your dad acquires a company that... So the last 20 years, I've been helping him. We repositioned the brand. I think one of the important things, which we set there was, when I started working with my father, one of the first things that he asked me to do was to go to trade shows. So we went to Bologna, to Cosmoprof, and because not many people at the company at the time spoke English, he asked if I could go and help during spring break, And I would go, and one of the things that was very interesting is we would tell this story of the company, but when we showed the products, they didn't really reflect how special Granado was. So the first project we worked on was really creating a packaging because the family had left behind the archives. And so we had everything there. And so one of the first things was we created, for example, the Carioca line, which was a tea. And we got the artwork and created this fragrance, which now is one of our best sellers. And the fragrance is very contemporary, but the packaging is very unique and traditional. So one of the first things was really seeing how we can be different. And so we created these pillars, which is being proud of our heritage, being Brazilian, having a superior quality with an affordable price, so kind of a luxury, but being accessible to everyone. And so throughout the years, it's been 20 years, but it's also made this rebranding, and for the company to go forward, it's made it so much easier because everyone has these pillars in their head. And so since then, we've started opening stores because we felt that for us at the time, 20 years ago, the experience of going in a Granado store with the original furniture. If you go to Brazil, you'll notice that it's a bit different, the style, because in Brazil, we have these like authentic wooden heritage pharmacy furnitures in our shops. And so then we started investing in this experience, and every year, long term, every year 8 stores, new products, working with perfumists.
So your father, when your father bought the company, it was previously an apothecary. It was just pharmaceutical products, mass market.
Yes.
And then they buy the company, and then you guys start to develop other product lines in order to make the brand what it is today, a beauty brand, and with beauty products that are. We'll get into the international part later, but you guys started to develop other product lines and research and development, right?
Yeah, because what's very unique about Brazil, which maybe some people don't know, is Brazil doesn't have any department stores, or especially luxury department stores. So when you're repositioning a brand, or if you're creating a brand, nowadays you have the internet, you can always do an online store, or you have now some multi-brands. But there is no real big luxury department store. And so that really made it tough, because if you only sell your products in pharmacies or in supermarkets, like we have the most known glycerin bar soap in the market, or our baby line is market leader. How do you position yourself as a luxury brand if you don't even have where you can sell the product? And so I remember when I started working with my father, I would bring products from the US, like a body scrub or a candle, and he would say, where are we going to sell that? And so because we had this pharmacy where the office was on top, I said, let's redo this pharmacy into something unique, and let's see, maybe we can just have this experience store. And that was when we started opening this shop. And through the shops now, it's very interesting, because what we sell in the shops is very different from what we sell wholesale. It's basically 2 separate lines, even though some shops we do have everything, because people can find everything, not everything, but like the products that they buy on a day-to-day basis in a pharmacy, like a soap. It's the most expensive soap in the pharmacy, but it's Granado. And when they go to a Granado shop, they want a gift, they want a perfume, a candle, something a bit different. And so in a way, it's almost like now we have 2 different businesses.
Yeah, when we were preparing for this interview, you mentioned that you can find Granado in a pharmacy for like very mass consumption, but also right now that you've been developing the brand internationally, it's positioned in luxury stores. And how's the perception for a Brazilian, a local market, to see Granado all of a sudden, this brand that you've been purchasing like since your grandma would put this ointment on, or the soap, or you were saying, to now being positioned in Le Bon Marché, for example, with a totally different branding and price point? How is it taken internationally?
It really has been a surprise. It's been amazing. When we started our international expansion, we were actually invited, as you mentioned, by the Bon Marché. And when they told us the price positioning that they were going to put on the products, we were a bit surprised because it was,
It was
like,
really up?
yes, it was
Okay.
3 times the price of what we would sell in Brazil. But after, we realized that it really was important because, one, as I mentioned before, we had to invest in the brand. And so people here don't know the brand abroad. And so we really have to invest a lot in marketing and brand awareness. And if you don't have that margin, you don't have that. Also, you have to position your brand with who the other brands in the market is, because if you arrive at a price that's a bit too low, the local consumers will think that the product doesn't have a perceived quality. So for us, that was a really important lesson. And also, eventually, we started opening our shops, and the shops here, and also the cost of having the personnel is much higher. And so with that, we're able to invest in the business. But I think also what's been very important is, which I think is interesting for many brands that are from abroad, from Latin America coming abroad, is the perception of the local consumer has really, when they travel and they see the brand or they see images online of Granado at Harvey Nichols and at Liberty, at El Corte Inglés, it really makes them proud and really makes them interested in trying these products. And sales have really exploded of these categories, which in the past I think Brazilians would have never considered. And then on the other hand, also perfumers, international perfumers wanting to work with us because they want to work with the Brazilian brand. And so it's really been interesting in ways that we would have never imagined it. Unfortunately, some of the times you can't even calculate how it's for business if you're measuring the investment.
I always say that. Sometimes you have a plan and it just goes, not in a straight line. It might be into a different route and really much bigger than what you envisioned to begin with. But I do want to bring out, I think that part of the success of the brand is basically the true DNA that it has. Your brand heritage is portrayed in every single element of your brand, your packaging, your visuals. I mean, you guys have to go to the pop-up, the activation that they have at the LAFS pop-up. Everything portrays the Carioca style, and it does translate. What would you recommend to all of these brands and entrepreneurs that are listening to you on the importance of a true brand DNA? And coming from a very strong background of apothecary, maybe with a perception of, old furniture and all that, but now that you have developed the brand into a very colorful and flavorful brand, what is the importance of really having a very strong brand DNA?
I think one of the things, I don't know if it happens also in other countries in Latin America, but I think a lot of brands, sometimes they look outside at what brands outside are doing, and they want to be the same. And I think that for us, it was a bit of daring to be different. I think, for example, if you look at fragrance, if you look at cosmetics, many times they're very minimalist now. I think it's very aesthetic. And for us, we really want to stand out as a brand that's different. And also, I think in the talk before, they mentioned how important it is to be close to what is the difference, what is the customer who goes to your shop looking for. And I think because our stores, for me, the importance of having a store and being in store and listening to the customer, I mean, it's one of the things that until we had like store number 60, I always would go to set up the store. And now that we're starting our international, I go to all store setups because I really want to see who the consumer is, who's coming, what are they looking at, what do they buy. Because with that, I can take that back to the team and create products. For example, the best sellers that we have in the UK are not the same as here, are not the same as New York or Paris or Brazil. And it took time for us to realize that having, for example, a store in Paris that looked like an old apothecary with the farmácias, which is our logo in Brazil since 1870, French customers would come in the store and ask if we were sold Band-Aids, because for them it was just a regular pharmacy. And so these slight observations really
You
made
have to
us...
internationalize the perception.
Exactly, because it's not the same formula that works for Brazil. You have to keep the DNA, but how can I tweak it in a way where I stand out and people really see? So we changed the logo to Rio de Janeiro. We did a lot of packaging with Brazilian designers and Brazilian artists with flowers. And so it's slight tweaks. The furniture still has a Brazilian DNA, but it's a little bit more contemporary than just the pharmacy from 1870. And so with that, we really started to see a turn in local people entering the store and buying and...
You slightly started to answer my second question, but what's important is, like, I feel like sometimes for young brands, it's really hard to open their own store. They really rely maybe on going to trade shows or being picked up by buyers and retailers to be selling at some stores. What would you say it's that? I mean, obviously you mentioned grabbing the data of the customers is really important. Really understanding what they want and what they're looking for, that sometimes that information might not be completely transparent when it's in the hands of a retailer, because they just maybe report the units sold, but they don't report the feedback from the client, like, I like this smell, or I don't like this other thing. Do you feel that a young brand, is it hard? Would you recommend to go and take the risk of opening a known store with all the consequences, which are like fixed costs, rent? What would your recommendation be?
I really believe in retail. Obviously, a brand needs a department store or a buyer for brand awareness, but it's really hard for you to sell what maybe a brand buyer, what a department store buyer wants if you don't have the brand awareness. And so many times they want an investment, and sometimes the brand can't do it. It's very expensive. So I really believe in a mix, because I think if you have your store, you know what sells well, and then you can be more accurate when you're recommending what the buyer should be buying, because sometimes if it's just the buyer, she's not going to buy the whole collection. You depend on where in the store it's located, if the salespeople are trained, or if they're getting incentives from other brands to sell other products. So I think, unfortunately, you need a little bit of everything, but with the store, you really can connect with your customer, and you really can test to see what works, what doesn't work, and you can be more assertive with buyers. And unfortunately, not every buyer is going to, getting past the door is really hard, but then staying in the store is also super hard, because they want results, and if you're just there, it's tough. So with the shop, you can do events, you can do a bunch of stuff. So it's a very big investment, I understand, but at the same time, I think it really is important for the whole experience.
I really want to understand the Brazilian market a little bit more. Obviously, Brazil is such a big country. Sometimes my perception is that it's such a big country with so many clients and purchasing power that you guys don't need to get out of your country that much. You have your market there. But more and more I see brands like you and many Brazilian brands trying to be more international and get out. How does do you feel like that was the next step in your company? Or also, what would you recommend for other guys that want to come into Brazil and make business? How is the climate in Brazil for business and opening a brand there?
Well, Brazil is a very closed market, and I think because of that, many brands, and it's a closed, but it's a huge market, and so I think because of that, many brands don't leave Brazil. There's the language barrier. I think a lot of people ask why Brazilian brands also don't go into other Latin American countries. And the thing is, the investment sometimes is just the same as going into the US, or you have the same barriers. And so eventually people end up going to other markets because it's markets that they themselves know a little bit better and that they probably will see this return in terms of awareness. But as I mentioned, it's tough because Brazil doesn't have any department stores, but we are starting now to have a lot of multi-brands. We have cities like São Paulo that have shopping malls that are, I mean, amazing. Fernando, who's here, knows very well. But we have shopping malls like groups like Guatemi or JHSF, who are really investing in luxury brands, and the luxury market is booming. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's a huge market, but unfortunately because of that, many Brazilians brands, they don't leave Brazil. They stay in Brazil. But I think it's really an opportunity. I think when you take the first step of going abroad, and Brazilians, I always, people ask me, oh, so Brazilian customers, do they buy a lot of products? And I say, no, there are brand ambassadors.
You told me,
Yeah.
They're
They're the best. They take pictures of the store. They're proud of the store, because not many Brazilian brands go abroad, take the step. And probably the same in many of the brands that you have founded or that you work for. And I think when you do that, the local customer is really proud and cheers and helps, and they become our biggest influencers. And so I think it's a very important step. We've also reached a point where in Brazil we now have over 100 stores, and we feel that we have a product that really represents Brazil, that has the quality just as the products that are from here. We're very proud that all of our products are produced in the municipality that has the lowest GDP in Rio, and we're the #1 employer there, and so just that already is such a huge impact in terms of sustainability and on the local market. And I think it's the same. I think for all of your brands that we have to really make this Latin American brands really have this importance.
Earlier this morning, in a panel that was talking about Colombia, Maria Paz Gaviria did mention something like, sometimes when brands go abroad, it kind of feels a disconnection between the strategies that they apply locally to the strategies that they apply internationally. How do you feel that your brand has carried both strategies locally and...
Well, one of the things we've done is, and it wasn't always the case, but what we really, because we have these pillars that we've predefined in the past, we try and have everything that we do in terms of marketing and strategy is done by our local team, even like retail, our architects, it's all done in our headquarters in Brazil. And then we have team members in Paris, in London, here in New York, that are mostly doing the part of sales and execution. And so with that, we're able to keep a brand identity and strategy that's the same for everyone. And it also helps the communication so that you don't have teams that are working parallel to each other. So when we create, for example, a window display, we create it for all of our shops in the world. And when we create a campaign, sometimes a campaign will hold it. So for example, in the winter, we had a campaign in Brazil. It'll be the campaign here in January, but it's the same campaign, but mostly just because of the weather, because it'll be winter. But many of the times, they'll be parallel. So with that, we feel that it creates just this uniqueness. And then sharing what happens, I think, talking to the sales team, looking at data, and also talking to people that are there and being there really helps us here and be able to be more assertive in terms of products that we launch that will be, so for example, we knew before we came into the US that American customers who went to our shop in Lisbon and to our shop in Paris loved the fragrance Bossa. And so when we came to the US, we created a candle because the US is a huge consumer for candles that was in the fragrance for Bossa. So we always have we're always looking at this data so that we also don't launch something that doesn't make sense for the local market.
Even on pricing, you were mentioning that it's almost 3 times the price internationally sometimes. Would a Brazilian, go to Paris and say I'm going to buy it in Brazil maybe?
Definitely. So what we see is Brazilians, because Brazil is a very closed market, when they go abroad, they have an opportunity to buy brands that are not present in Brazil. But at the same time, they'll take a picture, or if they want to gift the product, they'll definitely gift it because they want to give someone something Brazilian as a gift. Brazilians who do buy our brand are usually Brazilians who live in the market for a long time, maybe don't go back home as much. But they recommend it to locals.
Yeah, that's why you're your best ambassadors. To wrap up, because I do want to open the floor for questions, what has been your biggest lesson in this 20 years of rebranding such a legacy brand, in thinking forward into another 150 years for you guys? What has been your biggest accomplishment and your biggest lesson in the road?
Well, I think be patient. My dad is a huge believer in long term. I think we live in a society now that is very anxious. And when I started working with him, I was very anxious. I mean, I was very young. But I think I've learned with him the importance of long term, because you can test things, you can hear and be able to tweak it. But also, I think be patient, but think long term, and really believe in what we settled there, and to keep along the path, because sometimes it can be very tempting. So all of our stores, for example, are owned by us, but for many times we were tempted into perhaps doing a franchise, but which would be quick and maybe long term not as effective for maintaining a brand awareness or a quality. And so we had these tempting offers, and in the end, we stuck close to what we thought was the strategy for maintaining Granado so it can be 150, 300 years old. Because I think also when you have a brand that has so much heritage and is important for Brazilians, you also have the responsibility of keeping that brand long term.
Legacy. It's legacy, definitely.
Which is kind of the same as what we heard previously in the other talk, but
yes,
it really
absolutely.
is true.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if you guys have any questions for Sissi. Raise the hands. Oh, okay. So microphones, please. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you? Okay, so my question is, I understood that your brand, I mean, I'm your fan. I want to tell everyone I love this brand. And I received it a year ago, and I was very surprised to see you. And I want to ask you a question. I know you are entering to the United States, so this is something very nice, because not Americans doesn't know your brand so well. And obviously you want to sell, right? That's your point. But do you have a strategy thinking, maybe I'm not go everywhere, maybe it's good to just keep it a little bit exclusive? Do you think it's important for the brands to start with a little niche? Even if they're not making such a money, it's important to be exclusive? Or you think it's just important not selling, because obviously you have enough, time, but how are you gonna enter in the United States? That's my question.
Thank you. It's a great question. It's actually very interesting, because it's similar to what happened to us in Brazil. It's really hard sometimes to say no, but you can imagine that, for example, if we sell our soaps in so many supermarkets in Brazil, how many tempted requests we had of orders of customers who wanted a perfume which costs, 100 times what a soap does, in their pharmacy or in their supermarket. And it's really hard to tell the customer, no, not really. So what we do sometimes is say, no, but I have this other really great kit that I created for you. But I think it's crucial, because when you're positioning your brand, you really have to be exclusive. It's much easier from the top to eventually go a little bit down than to be on the other side. And in Brazil, because the brand in the past, the quality, it wasn't the same, it's taken 20, 30 years for us to reach this kind of more exclusive, and to have the shop selling these different products. And so I think it's really crucial. It sounds a little bit snobbish, but in the end, really, it's how The brand is going to be perceived by customers. It's going to help you understand the consumer, because if it's everywhere, sometimes it's going to be in the wrong spot. And people don't know the brand. I remember about 10 years ago, a pharmacy from England, Boots, wanted to buy our products. And we didn't sell to them because we said, no one in the UK knows our product. It's going to be on the shelf. And it's very tempting because the first order is going to be really big. But then after a couple of weeks, they're going to take us out of the shop. And once you're out, you're never going to come back because they're going to have this perception of this brand that doesn't sell. So I think it's crucial really to pick the customers. It takes longer, like Samantha said, because sometimes you're not going to find the spot in the street that you want, in the perfect mall that you want, or in the department store that you like, or with the spa that you like. But, to have the right partners is really what I believe is going to eventually get the brand where it should be.
Thank you. Next question?
Yeah, I have the last question. Just because do you think a partnership, okay, with not whatever spa or another shop in the United States that is ready to, I'm just saying for everyone that's here, including myself, because I believe on very few products, so I want to give my clients just the few products that I have and invest also in that product because I believe in them. So your strategy as a collaboration, do you see something like doing it in a big shops, or you just want to do it in the wellness or maybe beauty?
It really
You don't
depends.
know.
For example, in Brazil recently, the Copacabana Palace celebrated 100 years, and they picked our Carioca line to be their amenity. And we don't do amenities for hotels like exclusive, but for the Copacabana Palace, obviously 100 years, it was something very special, which for the brand was important. So I think it really depends. Every project is is very different, but I think that when you're building a brand, it's not just one thing. I think it's a little bit, it's being with the right influencers, it's being at the right events like LAFS, having the shop in the right spot. So I really believe in in having the right partners. So I think it's a little bit of everything, and then waiting long term for people to discover the brand and the product.
I know there were, okay, another question. Thank you.
Gracias. My question is, how does Granados determine which products to introduce in different international markets, and what factors are most influential in shaping these decisions to align with varying consumer preferences globally? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. It's really different in cosmetics. I mean, the number one thing really is to see if the products are compliant with the local market. So when we entered the US, we saw that California is very strict in terms of alcohol content in the product. So for example, our diffusers are actually the only product in the world where the formulation here in the US is different, because we have a higher percentage of alcohol to help diffuse. But because we didn't want a product that had like a huge label saying, warning, danger, this might explode or something on it, we said no, we want to have a product that really reflects our sustainability, naturalness, etc. So that's the number one thing. But then we studied the local market. What are the best sellers? What do customers from these other nations, when they come to our shops in Brazil or when they come to our shops in other countries, what are they looking for? Are there certain categories? So it really depends. And then we start looking locally how we can expand, and we give that to the team, because in the past they were just working with works in Brazil and the best sellers in Brazil, and it's not the case. In Brazil, our local customers, they love lavender, for example, but lavender here is so common that it's a fragrance that we barely sell, and if I'm not mistaken, I think we're even like discontinuing it here because it's not something so unique. It's very unique to Brazilian culture and customers, but not to the local market. And then we started to realize that customers here, they're really interested in what's in the product. So we created a fragrance that has caju, which is a Brazilian fruit. We started using tonka, which is the Brazilian vanilla. So through that inspiration in bossa, carioca, that is the beach, but doing that not only with Brazilian perfumers, but also with international perfumers, renowned perfumers. So it's been a really fun experience because of that. So it's a mix of a lot of things.
One last question.
Yes, it's such as an inspiration to see a company for more than 100 years. Congratulations.
Thank you.
This is how small businesses we look up to. And the question is that as a brand like you, just going for more than a century, how do you guys keep the heritage so real when there is so much expansion like you guys are doing, because you're coming to the United States? So conquering the United States is just like conquering the whole world. And what is the secret? How do you keep the essence of a family business?
No, thank you for your question. Well, one of the things, and Igu is actually here, he's the head of our designers, is that we do everything in-house. So we don't work with agencies. We have all of our archives are digitalized. We have a team of 3 historians, and they actually digitalize everything so that our designers can use it as inspiration. And it's really having these values, the teams with retail. We have, for example, a mock window in the office. We have like a mock store, so we can see how the products work together. And I don't know, I think it's really paying a lot of attention to detail. I can be a little bit a control maniac with everything. But I think it's important for the sense of unity, for the shop, for the design, for everything to match and make sense. So, and I think a lot of people from the team have been on the team for a long time, and then we have a lot of people that come in to freshen the ideas so that we can have videos and image. And I think that balance really is what's made it maintain this integration and this sense of continuity.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending this session. Thank you, Sissi, and welcome.
Thank you so
to us.
much.
Thank you.
And please visit the pop-up. And on Tuesday, we're very excited that we're opening a kiosk in front of Farm in Aventura. So if you're from
Yes.
Miami, also come visit us.
Come visit. Thank you.